From 1942 to 1945, the Pacific Theater became one of the most hostile combat environments of the Second World War. The dense jungles of the Pacific Islands forced battles into close quarters, where firefights often took place at distances of less than 30 yards. In this setting, the United States Marine Corps introduced a weapon that would completely disrupt Japanese expectations of modern combat, the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. While official combat records rarely detail their battlefield use, the presence of Winchester Model 1897 and Winchester Model 1912 shotguns in Marine units represented a tactical advantage for which Japanese doctrine had no preparation. The Imperial Japanese Army had spent decades studying Western armies and preparing for war. Their manuals described countermeasures against British bolt-action rifles, American machine guns, French mortars, and Soviet submachine guns. But nowhere in their planning did they account for the shotgun, a weapon they considered useful only for bird hunting, not modern warfare. This oversight would prove significant. By the end of the war, the United States had fielded an estimated 25,000 Winchester Model 97s and 60,000 to 80,000 Model 12s across the Pacific. Spirit versus firepower. Japanese doctrine in 1942 was based on a belief in the supremacy of spiritual strength over material disadvantage. This was more than propaganda, it was a calculated response to industrial reality. Japan's annual steel production was less than what the United States produced in a single month. Faced with this imbalance, the Japanese military emphasized the superiority of the individual soldier in close combat. The result was a doctrine built on night infiltration attacks, bayonet charges, and hand-to-hand combat, tactics that had proven effective against Chinese forces, British defenders in Malaya, and even American troops in the Philippines. The standard pattern was clear: approach under darkness, penetrate enemy lines, and overwhelm defenders in brutal close-range assaults where Japanese soldiers expected their training and spirit to prevail. But the American shotgun disrupted this entire tactical framework. At the ranges where Japanese soldiers anticipated dominance, a Marine armed with a Winchester Model 97 could unleash 6 blasts of .00 buckshot in just 2 seconds using the shotgun's unique slam-fire capability. Each shell carried 9.33 caliber pellets, creating a devastating spread that made missing nearly impossible in thick jungle vegetation. The Guadalcanal campaign, August 1942 to February 1943, marked the first major American offensive in the Pacific. When the 1st Marine Division landed, they brought with them an assortment of weapons, rifles, machine guns, mortars, flamethrowers, and a limited number of shotguns. The exact number of shotguns issued to Marines during the campaign is not recorded in official documents, but photographs and veterans' accounts confirm their presence. Typically, they were carried by point men on jungle patrols or by Marines assigned to perimeter defense, where ambushes and infiltration attempts were common. One of the most famous clashes of the campaign, the Battle of the Tenarue River, often mistakenly called the Battle of the Tenarue, but in reality fought at Alligator Creek, August 21, 1942, demonstrated the intensity of Japanese assaults. Colonel Kaineo Ichiki led 917 men against Marine positions, confident that the doctrine of close-range combat would succeed. Instead, his force was annihilated. Nearly 800 Japanese soldiers were killed in the fighting. Official after-action reports attribute most of these losses to Browning M1917 water-cooled machine guns and 37mm anti-tank guns firing canister rounds. Shotguns are rarely mentioned, and when they are, it is usually in the context of close-in perimeter defense rather than decisive offensive action. A weapon of patrols and perimeters. In the dense jungle, shotguns filled a specialized but limited role. Marines on patrol often placed a shotgunner at the front of the column. If ambushed, the point man could unleash a blast of buckshot that bought precious seconds for the squad to maneuver. In night perimeter defenses, shotguns were positioned at infiltration points where their wide pellet spread compensated for poor visibility and quick reaction times. The psychological effect of the shotgun was also noted. The distinctive sound of a pump action being racked in the dark jungle carried a weight of its own, both as a warning and as a deterrent. Still, in the official reports of Guadalcanal, it was rifles, machine guns, and artillery that carried the day. Shotguns were present, but never the centerpiece. A critical flaw: ammunition in the jungle. One of the greatest challenges for the shotgun in the Pacific was not the weapon itself, but its ammunition. At the time, standard U.S. military shotgun shells were built with paper hulls. In the 100% humidity of Guadalcanal, these shells absorbed moisture, swelled, and often became unusable. Veterans described shells so swollen that they could no longer be chambered, or worse, had to be hammered into the gun, a fatal impossibility in combat. This reliability issue meant that many Marines avoided carrying the shotgun unless specifically ordered. The problem would persist until March 29, 1945, when the U.S. Army officially adopted the all-brass M19 shotgun shell, finally solving the moisture issue. But by then, the war was nearly over, and shotguns had already been relegated to a marginal role. After Guadalcanal, the shotgun remained in Marine and Army inventories throughout the Pacific campaigns, but its role never expanded beyond niche use. New Guinea, a jungle too wet for shotguns. The Army's 32nd and 41st Infantry Divisions, operating in the unforgiving jungles of New Guinea, requested shotguns after hearing of Marine experiences on Guadalcanal. On paper, the weapon seemed ideal. Combat ranges were often measured in single-digit yards, and the spread of buckshot appeared perfect for ambushes. In practice, however, the same ammunition problem that plagued Guadalcanal grew even worse. The constant rains, river crossings, and near-permanent humidity of the highlands meant that paper-hulled shells swelled beyond usability. Many units that had requested shotguns ended up leaving them in rear areas, relying instead on the M1 Garand, Thompson submachine gun, and Browning automatic rifle bar. Shotguns that had seemed devastating in training ranges proved unreliable in real jungle combat until brass-cased shells finally arrived, too late to make a difference in New Guinea. The Philippines, urban combat and shotgun promise. When U.S. forces returned to the Philippines in 1944, the 6th Army requested large numbers of shotguns for the anticipated urban fighting in Manila. The confined spaces of city blocks, the close quarters of building assaults, and the need for rapid room clearing seemed perfectly suited to 12-gauge firepower. Indeed, some units, especially the 37th Infantry Division, did employ shotguns in house-to-house combat. Yet after-action reports emphasized flamethrowers and demolition charges as the real battle winners against Japanese strongpoints. Shotguns had value in sudden, close-range encounters, but in deliberate assaults, their short effective range and limited magazine capacity, 6 shells compared to the Thompson's 30-round magazine, left them overshadowed. Iwo Jima, a battlefield of fire, not buckshot. At Iwo Jima, February 1945, 3 Marine divisions landed with nearly 1,000 authorized shotguns. But the volcanic ash, hardened bunkers, and massive cave networks of the island negated their usefulness. The campaign became dominated by flamethrowers, explosives, and combined arms assaults. The M2-2 flamethrower could project burning fuel 40 yards into tunnel, far beyond shotgun range. Marines clearing bunkers relied on fire and demolition more than buckshot. Even worse, by the time brass-case shells were officially adopted in March 1945, the Battle of Iwo Jima had already ended. Marines there still struggled with swollen paper shells, further reducing the weapon's already limited effectiveness. Okinawa, shotguns in the war's last act. The Battle of Okinawa, April-June 1945, finally saw Marines equipped with reliable brass-cased ammunition. In theory, the 1st and 6th Marine Divisions fielded over 600 shotguns with dependable shells. But the nature of the battle offered few opportunities for their use. The Japanese 32nd Army had shifted tactics, abandoning mass banzai charges in favor of fortified defenses in depth. Engagements were fought at longer ranges, with infantry supported by tanks, artillery, and flamethrower units. Shotguns saw limited action in the final reduction of bunkers and caves, and they remained useful for military police units handling prisoners and civilians. Still, their impact on Okinawa's outcome was negligible compared to artillery, tanks, and air power. Silence in Japanese records. One of the most striking aspects of the shotgun story is the complete absence of Japanese countermeasures. Unlike Germany in World War I, where protests were filed against American use of trench shotguns under the Hague Convention, Japan never lodged formal diplomatic complaints. Captured Japanese documents and training manuals detail methods of countering American machine guns, flamethrowers, mortars, and tanks. They even describe how to build spider holes and reverse slope defenses to blunt American firepower. Yet nowhere do they mention the shotgun as a weapon requiring special tactics. This silence is telling. It suggests that while Japanese infantry certainly encountered shotguns in the field, the weapon never reached a level of battlefield impact that required doctrinal adaptation. Veterans' memories, a rare mention. Interviews and memoirs from Pacific War veterans reveal a similar pattern. In the Library of Congress Veterans History Project and the National Museum of the Pacific War's oral histories, detailed accounts of rifles, machine guns, and flamethrowers abound. Shotguns, however, appear only in passing, usually in the context of night guard duty, prisoner handling, or jungle patrol ambushes. Famed memoirs such as Eugene Sledge's With the Old Breed and Robert Leckey's Helmet for My Pillow, both written by Marines who served in the thick of the Pacific campaigns, never mention shotguns at all. Their silence reinforces the idea that the weapon, though present, never shaped the battle the way heavier firepower did. When shotguns are mentioned, they are often remembered as niche tools. One Marine recalled using a Model 97 on Guadalcanal. It was good for night watch and jungle paths, but when the shooting started, you wanted a rifle. Another veteran noted that while each squad was supposed to have a shotgun, half the time it stayed with the company gear, two specialized for everyday use. The myth outgrows the reality. Despite this limited battlefield role, the cultural legacy of the shotgun exploded after the war. Popular films, pulp histories, and later video games often depicted Marines charging through jungles or clearing bunkers with pump-action shotguns, creating a lasting public image of the weapon as an iconic Pacific theater tool. In truth, shotguns never occupied such a central place in Marine tactics. They were a specialized side tool, not a mainstay of squad firepower. But the visual drama of a shotgun blast at close range, combined with its association with American ingenuity, turning a hunting gun into a battlefield weapon, made it irresistible for storytellers. The result was a weapon whose mythological impact far exceeded its documented combat role. Training versus reality. The U.S. military took shotguns seriously enough to dedicate training resources to them. Technical Manual TM 9-285, published in September 1942, covered the operation of the Winchester Models 97 and 12, as well as the Remington Model 11, Stevens 5.2620, and Ithaca 37. At Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, and Parris Island, Marines practiced slam firing, close-range jungle shooting, and bunker clearing drills. They were taught that shotguns excelled at point security on patrols, rapid response to night infiltration, clearing caves and bunkers, guarding prisoners. This training created the impression that shotguns would play a decisive role in Pacific combat. But once deployed, battlefield realities were far less accommodating. Controlled training ranges didn't replicate jungle humidity, volcanic ash, or long-range firefights. The scenarios where shotguns thrived were less common than anticipated. The ammunition burden. Logistics presented another obstacle. A 12-gauge shell was nearly twice as heavy and 3 times as bulky as a standard .30-06 rifle cartridge. This meant a Marine could carry 80 rounds of rifle ammunition in the same weight and space as only 36 shotgun shells. In a theater where every pound of ammunition had to be shipped thousands of miles, then ferried ashore by landing craft, supply officers prioritized rifles, machine guns, and mortars. Shotgun shells were often issued in small quantities, sometimes just 1 or 2 boxes per Marine, to be conserved throughout an entire campaign. This scarcity further reduced the shotgun's battlefield role. Marines simply couldn't afford to use them liberally. Maintenance records tell the story. Administrative documents reinforce this picture. Ordnance records show constant requests for replacement parts for rifles, machine guns, and bars, signs of heavy use. By contrast, requests for shotgun parts were rare. Armorers often noted that shotguns required cleaning from storage corrosion, not battlefield wear. Ammunition records follow the same trend. Divisions consumed millions of rifle rounds and hundreds of thousands of machine gun belts. Shotgun shell requisitions remain modest, often marked for training or rear area security rather than frontline combat. The paper trail suggests that, despite their numbers on paper, most shotguns spent more time in armories or rear positions than at the tip of the spear. Other nations in the Pacific. The U.S. was not the only Allied power fighting in the Pacific, but it was virtually alone in deploying combat shotguns in any meaningful number. British and Australian forces, who fought in the jungles of Burma and New Guinea, relied on rifles, the Lee Enfield, and submachine guns like the Sten and Owen gun. They did not issue shotguns in significant numbers, yet they fought effectively in environments similar to those where Americans thought shotguns would excel. Soviet forces, fighting brutal close-quarters battles in Stalingrad and elsewhere, also ignored the shotgun. Despite enormous small arms production, they favored submachine guns like the PPSH-41 for short-range firepower. Chinese nationalist and communist forces, who faced the Japanese in countless small unit clashes across villages and mountains, similarly made no large-scale use of shotguns, even though they might have benefited from their simplicity. The absence of shotgun adoption among other combatants highlights a key point. While shotguns were devastating under ideal conditions, they were not essential to success in close combat. Other nations achieved similar or greater effectiveness with more versatile weapons. Post-war evaluations. After 1945, the U.S. military conducted extensive reviews of its small arms. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, and emerging recoilless rifles received priority for future development. Shotguns, by contrast, were barely mentioned in official evaluations. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, confirmed this marginal role. Despite brutal close combat in trenches and villages, U.S. Marines and soldiers relied on the M1 Garand, bar, and carbines. Shotguns saw limited use, mainly for guard duties and prisoner control. It wasn't until the Vietnam War that shotguns returned to combat in noticeable numbers. Dense jungle fighting and tunnel warfare revived interest in pump-action and semi-automatic shotguns. Even then, they remained specialized weapons, carried by point men and tunnel rats rather than issued across the board. Continuity into the present. Modern military forces continue to field shotguns, but always in niche roles. Door breaching with specialized ammunition. Less lethal crowd control, rubber pellets, bean bags. Close-quarters battle scenarios where wide pellet spread is advantageous. This pattern reflects the same limitations that constrained them in the Pacific War: limited range, low ammunition capacity, and logistical inefficiency compared to rifles and carbines. The mythology of the trench gun. In the decades after World War II, the shotgun took on a life of its own in popular memory. Movies, novels, and later video games often depicted Marines storming through jungles or clearing Japanese bunkers with pump-action shotguns blazing. The image was cinematic. Dramatic close-range firepower, the distinctive pump-action sound, and the sense of American ingenuity, turning a hunting weapon into a fearsome tool of war. For audiences, the shotgun became a symbol of pragmatism, brutality, and American firepower. But the historical record tells a different story. The historical truth. Shotguns were present in Marine and Army units across the Pacific, authorized at about 300 per Marine division, trained with extensively in the U.S. before deployment. Yet they were also hampered by faulty ammunition until March 1945, rarely mentioned in after-action reports or veteran memoirs. Logistically inefficient, with shells that were heavy and bulky. Confined to specialized roles like patrol point security, perimeter defense, and prisoner handling. By every measure, statistical, logistical, and tactical, shotguns remained secondary weapons. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, artillery, and flamethrowers shaped the outcomes of Pacific battles, not the occasional blast of buckshot. Why the myth survived? The shotgun's legend grew not from its battlefield record, but from its visceral drama. Nothing looks or sounds like a pump shotgun in action. American self-image. The idea of adapting a humble hunting gun into a weapon of war fit the national narrative of pragmatism and innovation. Storytelling needs. Films and popular histories preferred the spectacle of shotguns over the less cinematic grind of artillery barrages or logistics. In short, the shotgun became iconic not because of what it actually accomplished in the Pacific War, but because of what it represented in American cultural memory. Final assessment. Japanese infantry never anticipated facing 12-gauge shotguns in battle, and indeed, they made no preparations against them. But this oversight mattered little. Shotguns were too rare, too logistically constrained, and too hindered by ammunition problems to alter the course of the Pacific War. Their true significance lies not in battlefield outcomes, but in the mythology they inspired. They became symbols of raw American firepower, forever immortalized in the stories, films, and games that followed. The reality, however, is more modest. A specialized weapon, effective in narrow circumstances, overshadowed by the industrial, logistical, and tactical power that truly won the war. Shotguns may not have shaped history on the battlefield, but they certainly shaped history in memory.